Hello, everyone. My name is Tracy Siska. I'm Executive Director of the Chicago Justice Project. I'm also working on my PhD in criminology, and I am now a visiting professor in criminology. CJP's, the whole mission of CJP is to try to do exactly what David was talking about, which is connect data in the Chicago area from call for service through adjudication across the entire system. Now, as horrible as this, this doesn't sound that bad or this difficult. The problem is this has never been done anywhere in the country. And the reality is the agencies don't share this data amongst themselves. So we have plenty of advocates within each of the agencies that want to get this done. But because for political purposes and other reasons, the cops don't have prosecutors' data, prosecutors don't have the court's data, they don't have calls for service data. So they can't tell really what's really coming, what comes before them or comes after them in the system. They don't really have a clue. So, when we talk with Smart Chicago, the idea of the site is to try to document a couple things. One, to the best of our knowledge, and as much as they would cooperate, the data fields that they do collect, or that we could through sourcing and other ways somehow confirm what they collect, document what they collect, and document to some degree what's available. So for calls for service, and with the organization, Office of Emergency Management Communications, they were reasonably responsive to a Freedom of Information request and gave us the fields. The CPD didn't respond at all. They said basically, hell no. The state's attorney, hell no. They're the darkest, they're the big dark black hole of the criminal justice. We have no idea what they collect. They don't open up any of their stuff. The courts, the clerk's office that maintains it said no. We already had some court data, which is another project we're already working on, and we had sources that had already collected greater depth of that data, so we were able to tell the fields that they had. And Cook County Jail was very responsive. So some degrees of this data, it is about what we have confirmed from the agencies, other is just what through sources we were able to. You want me to go over the specific fields? Sure. Okay. So we know for OEMC, they collect a significant amount of data. You can look at all. OEMC? Well, Office of Emergency Management Communications. Sorry, I speak in acronyms. It's because of the system. They do collect a lot of data, and a lot of it is automatically off your phone. So if you're calling from a home, they automatically know where you're calling from. If you're calling from any kind of landline. It's geocoded right away. They also, if you're on a cell phone, they will connect, the address will come up to the nearest tower. Okay? So they have a fair amount that is basically should be FOIAable. Now I say should be because when I say should be means under law, yes, you can get it. Under practice, maybe not. Okay? CJP is working on to open access to all of this stuff universally. So you don't even have to go through FOIA. I believe, right, they're working on it. Is there someone at the city working on OEMC data? Isn't that the word?
Yes. The tricky part is making sure that this data stays to where you can't, it's not personally identifiable. The city wants to be very careful about not releasing 911 information for crime victims, and it's harder to do that.
So there's a fair amount of data that isn't. Most of what isn't is just a level of data that would be able to let you track the specific person. Okay? Under law, you should be able to get to the 100 block of who called. No one that I know of has ever seen this data outside of OEMC. Okay, so I'm working myself. CJP's working independently of the mayor's office to try to open this up. The only data that, like I said, these are the only data fields, and these are literally, sometimes they know the floor, they know, what apartment number, all of that. That stuff should be exempt. But outside of that, you're going to get basically what you should be able to get once this is open to some degree is what the call is about. Let me rephrase that. It's about what the operator that answers your phone thinks you're calling about and what you say you're calling about. It's very important. All right. You should be able to get the response time, down to the district, the beat, the officer. You should be able to get all of that within this data. And since I'm anal about people knowing exactly what I mean by the operator knowing or saying, knowing what the call's about, some people call 911 and will not be as honest as they should be about what's going on. If you call and you have a response and you're used to calling about things and no one shows up, people often elevate the seriousness of the call, right? And if you're having a problem and you say all of a sudden you think the person may have a gun, the response is much quicker than my boyfriend just pushed me. And if you call multiple times, that happens. So you got to know, part of this, hope of this project is people learning what all this information is about. But that's one of the things. It's all about what the operator knows, okay, at least from their end. It often doesn't match what police reports are written, what the next step is. We want to just keep going down from agency to agency.
Do you want to talk about the national model?
Oh, well, the national model is one thing we also added, is that there's links to, we went around and tried to see where in the country they were doing it better. Dallas has literally, I think within a couple hours or a half an hour of the case being closed, you have an online feed, pretty much a live feed of 911 calls. I wasn't ever able to be clear on whether those were unique calls, like unique incidents, because if a gunshot is fired, that's the other thing. You have to get unique incidents. If a gunshot is fired and I hear someone screaming in an alley, there will be 5, 7, 8, 10 calls. So if you look at the gross number, OEMC tries to parse out the unique numbers. I'm not sure. I think Dallas does it, but I can't confirm it. But it is by far the most open of any calls or service around the country. Seattle, I think, also has a data portal like Chicago. But I think theirs is delayed a day for their calls or service, or several hours. So Dallas is the limit. There's some other models that are pretty good too.
So we can.
Well, you know what? Go to victimization real quick. Since we're doing this around as well. Let's see. Okay, we're in the midst of filling out these numbers, but it's important for people that are doing crime stuff to understand that the call, what the police report, or even the calls for service are not all the victimizations that occur. We know through national studies, I'm an academic geek, that varying to certain degrees, we know here, we can tell you sexual assaults, about 1/4 of them are reported to police. Now, there are some studies that say 1 in 10 are reported, which means whatever number we have in Chicago, like 1,400, it could actually be 14,000 that are actually occurring. Okay? So don't look just at crime incident numbers or call for services being the whole global environment of what the victimizations are occurring, because that is often not it. Many people don't call police for a variety of reasons. And the more you get into underserved communities, and the more you get into immigrant communities, like Albany Park to a degree, if you get into Little Village and Pilsen, those numbers are seriously affected by immigration issues. So those numbers are far more skewed than what you see actually reported in that community. Because people won't call because they're worried about bringing the justice system and having to be worried about people being deported. So it's important to know these figures. These are from national research, and they're reasonably consistent throughout time. It gets done every couple of years. We got these numbers from what's called, I think it's up there, the National Crime Victimization Survey. And that happens every couple of years. And basically that whole survey is to try to find out what's called the dark figure in crime, which is how many crimes are going unreported. It's reasonably consistent over time. The definitions are reasonably consistent.
You can see it varies by, but it's pretty clear. It varies by how much people expect they're going to get back from calling the police. Vehicle theft usually gets reported, but
yeah, I agree. And vehicle theft you have to, because you have to call police to get a report to get your insurance. So people are going to be calling for that, unless they have very expensive cars or insurance ain't going to be any good. So one issue that's near and dear to my heart is violence against women. So if you look at sexual assault and domestic violence, there's a lot more of it going on here than we know. And these are national figures, so they could change so much for Chicago. So it may be that 65% get reported in Chicago. We don't have any research that's down to the city area, anywhere in the country. Or they're revamping the National Crime Victimization Survey as we speak to sample cities. But it could be that only 30% or only 5% of sexual assaults get reported. The Chicago police are known for being very bad on both those issues, so I wouldn't be surprised if those reporting numbers are much lower here. Let's say go to police, right? It's a nice. Oh, incidents, yeah. Okay, we kind of broke up the police aspect of this. A lot of what you're going to see here, and if we were to scroll down deeper, a lot of these fields are already available on the portal. So that's how we knew right away that they exist. Obviously, the Chicago police did not respond. In fact, they recently denied a FOIA to the empty fields of what they collect because they were worried that if we would learn their schema and someone would then hack their system. Was their response on paper, right? It's ridiculous. But a lot of the other fields that aren't on the portal, well, there's not many of them, but what there were, we were able to source out from either internal sources to the department or people that already worked with their data. A lot of academic researchers work with it every day. You won't get, even if you were able to FOIA this and win, you probably won't get the name of the complainant in bulk data. You won't get the name of the officers, even though you probably should. And the other issue is, and this is an important one for doing analysis, is you won't get, and we lost an appeal to the Attorney General's office, you won't get the relationship between the offender and the victim, typically. They have whether it's domestic, but they do keep fields on whether or not it's if it's a domestic incident, what kind of relationship the offender and victim have. And when David was talking about violence reporting and guns and everything, it's very important because while the media loves to report everything being gang related, that's not necessarily all the shooting and stuff is gang related. It's not necessarily true, right? And they give you very little access to information that would allow you to assess that. And they only solve about 36% of the homicides. So when I think many of these, they really don't have a clue what's going on, especially if it's someone who drive-by or something. They don't really know the relationship. Better if they did. They also don't pay attention to that field, as it turns out. The national model is the Chicago Police Department. There's the Seattle, I think, also has a very similar incident-based system. Once again, though, you guys got to understand, this is very, very, very limited. Right? It doesn't give you any information about the race, gender, age of the victims or the offenders, whether or not there's an arrest, whether or not they press charges. None of that is in the data. And that would really give a much richer picture of what's going on and be able to help you understand and judge the response from the police department. There are all kinds of allegations. Chicago is very segregated. Even if they didn't give you the race of the offender, but if they just gave you the geolocation of stuff and the arrest and whether or not you could do it by race. But they're very worried about people analyzing it and figuring stuff out. New York recently pulled their data back. New York Police Department. They were so sick of partially wrong and partially right. They were so sick of people that thought they knew what they were talking about misusing it. And they having to fight these constant PR battles about stuff that wasn't true. And I recently had one where someone had taken crime data and the fact that the FBI doesn't take Chicago police UCR data. They don't take incident data from the Chicago police. It has to go through the state police. What the difference is, but there was a discrepancy in the 80s. But somehow that still counts, and that's why the Chicago Police Department is hiding thousands of rapes in Lakeview. Right? And there's this big community uproar about it, and it's totally untrue. But the New York Police Department responded with, we don't give a shit. We're just going to pull it back, and no one's going to have access to it. And there's uproar within the hierarchy of this police department to do the same thing. City of Chicago. Right? Is there anything else?
And then we tell you how to access.
Oh, yeah. The data portal is online. You can get it through the city if you want incident data. If you want to get richer, you have two choices. Richer set of data. You can try to FOIA it through the Freedom of Information Act. I wouldn't unless you don't want your data to your 120. or, because you'll probably never get it, or you can go and file a request to the Research and Development Division of the CPD. If you go under, somewhere on their website, either under news or community reports or something, there's a request form you can fill out. They will not give you identified data. They may give you a richer set than what's on the portal. It'll take forever, and you have to sign a non-disclosure agreement, and you have to tell them what you're going to do with it before it. And the agreement says you will not circulate the data to any other human being in the world. Or you'll return the data. How you return data, I don't know. But literally the agreement says you will return the data to the CPD. There's a bunch of other models besides just Chicago. But for incident data, this level, Chicago is the best.
I was going to say that there's an interesting thing that you see when you kind of look at the data in terms of the whole system, and if you're thinking about it from the developer's perspective, at least Zion, is that you see that the incident data, which is something that Chicago likes to say they have a good amount of stuff out there for the data portal, and they do, but it is hard, extremely hard, to use this data to talk about anything that happens at a later step in the process, like court data or jail data, and to tie those together. Because, well, I think it's actually not because they don't release it. It's actually more because the agencies don't talk to each other. So these people don't know what the court is saying about what happens with this incident. It's not directly in this data set.
No, you're right.
So you can see how getting that systematic approach is difficult. We're looking at this.
We're trying. We have a couple projects underway where we're trying to get from them how the data connects between agencies. At the call for service, we know the report number. It's called the RD number for the Chicago Police Department. It's generated by a computer system. 99% of the time, while the incident's occurring, an OEMC creates that incident number. We were told by OEMC there was no other way in the history of the world that anyone else, other than someone in OEMC, could generate that number. We then learned later on that, no, at certain times, under certain circumstances, the police department can go in and generate the number themselves without ever registering a call for service through OEMC. So we think that between OEMC and the CPD, that RD number should cross over. Because the state's attorney doesn't offer any access to any data whatsoever, we have no idea if the RD number turns over. Okay? Connects. So that's... Okay. This data is purely through sources. The police department refused vigorously to tell us what data they captured at arrest. Which is funny because under the law, arrest reports are actually open. So you can go and claim go to the records division at 35th and State and say, I want this guy's arrest report. There you go. And they'll give you a copy. It's like $10 or $5, 15 minutes, you get a copy of the arrest report. But God forbid they tell you one of those fields on the paper transferred into their computer. Right? They won't tell you. Much of it really is just they take the incident data, copy it over. The other sad thing is, this is going to sound bizarre for a room of tech people. Their crime incident database does not connect to their arrest database, nor does the arrest database connect to the incident database. Right. So if you're looking up an incident in the incident database, you can't see if someone was arrested. And if you're looking up the arrest, you can't see for what incident. You can't kind of connect to the incident database. They spent $40 million with Oracle to do that.
Wow. That's pretty bad.
Okay. Henrico County, if I'm pronouncing that right, Virginia, is a national model. Other models were Dallas. There was not a whole lot. I mean, literally, I think these are the two only places that I could find now. There's 100 counties in Illinois alone, so I did my best. So there's probably some other county out there. But the best I could find, these are the only two that actually made any arrest data available whatsoever. It isn't a popular thing by police departments to do. I guess they want to be able to tell you the clearance rate. They don't want to be computer calculated. You should be able to FOIA like the general information about the arrestee, Everything except like the home address. I would assume that they're going to cover that. Theoretically, you should be empowered to do that by the law. Whether you get it or not. And once again, you'd get it the same way. You'd either file a FOIA with the police department or get it through a data request. Yeah. And pray on either one. Yeah, let's go to the black hole. Okay. So you don't see a whole lot of fields here. Okay? We really have no idea what they actually capture. And I will say that this is not an entirely uncommon thing. Prosecutors' offices are very secret. They view this like right of prosecutorial discretion, and whether or not to charge someone is like absolute, and you can never question what they do. So they don't tend to release any information. However, in the state of Wisconsin partnered with the National Institute for Justice 8 years ago, something like that. And they jointly funded and created an open source case management system called Protect. And every prosecutor's office in every county in Wisconsin uses it. And I went to view it through a friend. I went to Milwaukee County, and I went to view it. A friend was doing research up there. And it advanced. Everyone liked it so much that it got put in with the courts. They wrote an extension. And then it got in with the police departments. So when I was there, they were already for a year, the police departments throughout the state were communicating traffic data electronically to the prosecutors. And the prosecutors were sending that to the courts, all electronically. And they were starting to move to felony cases, like criminal cases. We're all going to be electronic. So instead of a cop going to talk to the prosecutor with a stack, I've seen it, with a stack of files this big about seeking charges, they'll just walk up and everything's on the system. They can track, they click on a person, I saw them do it. They click on a person, they can tell you every case they've ever been involved in, a witness or a victim, or the defendant. They can tell you all of that going back several years. And in Milwaukee, it's so good that if someone, they're very into it, that if someone's in jail a day or two longer than they shouldn't be, there's a warning in the system that alerts the prosecutor that's handling the case, and they get an email saying, get this guy, file the paperwork, get him out of jail, because we're spending money we shouldn't be. And then a day or two later, if that's not done, it gets an email to their data person who emails the prosecutor and says, the next email is going to the head of the office. And if the guy's not out in the day, it goes to the head of the office, and then that prosecutor gets called in. Right? They've also been, he's much more progressive than we have here. They looked at pot possession prosecutions in Milwaukee, and they realized they were only prosecuting felony-level pot possessions for blacks. So he asked his data people why, right? And they looked at it, it's because the suburbs in Milwaukee County, all white, it's 10 tickets. In the city, fair amount of black residents, 3 tickets, right? So the prosecutor blew a stack. He's like, that's it, drop every case. It's like, why? He calls the prosecutors, drop every damn case. Dropped them all, went to the city council and said, you got to change it. I'm not prosecuting another felony-level drug case where blacks get 3 tickets, whites get 10. Right? That's what they could find out if they actually had a system that could provide them knowledge. This office is almost still all paper. They put a case management system in about 3 or 4 years ago. Nobody uses it. They don't use it. No one, I mean, occasionally you see a prosecutor walk in with an iPad to court, but just about everyone else still walks in rolling into big things of paper. There's no, sadly for the open data community, there's just no, the top level is really not interested in data. They operate, unfortunately, under, if I can't know, then I can't be responsible for knowing, right? To them, it's a shield because they don't know. They can't possibly. We asked them, we filed a FOIA a couple of years ago about how many sexual assault cases came in from the state's attorneys, from the Chicago Police Department for felony approval. The head of policy for Anita Alvarez, one of the top people in the office, had to go around to all the prosecutors' offices and hand count the files because they had no clue and no way to count. Ask them how many cases they have open, they don't have a clue. They can't possibly tell you how many cases. Right? This is the largest prosecutor's office, ladies and gentlemen, in the country. The largest unified court system in the country is Cook County. New York's is broken up. So this is as big as it gets, and they're almost all paper.
What kind of incentive is there for them to do that?
Not a lot. We need to push them into making. We need to make the incentive happen, because for now it isn't, right? And it's a very understand. No, it's they're worried about the political fallout, right? Which is real to a certain extent. But in Milwaukee, they took the attitude is we're going to get in front of it. So when he found out they were prosecuting blacks way more than whites, he held a press conference. I looked at the data. I got the data. I looked at the data. This is what happened. I'm sorry it'll never happen again. I'll come back in a year and tell you what our numbers are, because we have the numbers to tell you. He got in front of it. That just isn't the mentality here. So basically, we have no idea what's going on here. So connecting data through the system is almost impossible. You can file a FOIA. They deny almost all of them, or all of them pretty much. Cuyahoga, if I'm pronouncing that right? Cuyahoga, thank you. County Prosecutor's Office is the model. The only other one I think I found was in Elkhart County, which might actually be Illinois.
No, in Indiana.
Is it Indiana? Okay. There aren't very many prosecutors' offices that make data available. In Wisconsin, you can literally go online to the state Supreme Court's website, and you can check the status of every case every day. A couple hours after there's a hearing, even if it's a status hearing, that is updated in the case, right? And that's data that's from the entire court system, from the entire state. But that's just a decision they made to do it. Well, the other issue about Milwaukee, though, you'll see it's not up there. They don't really release data, though, to the public, as much as they have it going out of style. Slow down.
So, the last one. It's really the same data that the prosecutor looks at. That's really the same data that they would see in the court agencies, right?
No, yes, for cases that are prosecuted. All right. Here's the one issue that's missing out of that. You would get in the court data every case that's prosecuted that enters the court system, right? But for felonies in Cook County, it doesn't enter the court system until the prosecutors authorize it to. They have to give approval. So there's a key, gatekeeper situation. So it isn't until it's approved for felonies that it enters the court system. Then you can tell through the court data if you can get that level of data, right? All right, so we're at jail data?
Yeah.
All right. So the jails were very responsive to the FOIA. So all of this is literally from them telling us what they collect.
Here, the open data is actually what I took an opportunity to mark that up and put it in there myself because I make sure I didn't change anything too much, but just annotating it because it's the same data we see for the Cook County Jail Data Project, for the scraper that we had for that, for Spring Chi-Town Coding Crew's project. And it's interesting, it's kind of like each these stages could be represented by a similar project, theoretically. Like, they're all like their own separate, part of the process.
Yeah. So you can mostly get this data, the open stuff, you can get off from you guys, right? The 26 California Data Project. You can FOIA the Cook County Sheriff's Office, which is the one that runs the jail, if you want to get a different, greater depth of data. Can you scroll down a little bit? Who's the national model? King County in Washington's the national model.
One thing I see is there's a ridiculous amount of jail data that is actually collected the time they take someone in.
Yeah, and there's stuff like,
it just keeps going.
Yeah, tattoos and stuff like that I don't think is really that worthy.
Yeah.
Of analysis.
There are some interesting fields in here. It's the kind of stuff that for the Cook County Jail Data Project, you kind of want to see in some ways. You really like, it's like, oh, this is interesting. Just because it has domain knowledge, sort of. And you can see some of it's like, what do I want to point out? So they have all these fingerprints and different IDs. They have very interesting stuff like the RD number. Stuff that links it all together, I think, in here somewhere, right?
Yes. There should be You know, I'm not sure if there's an RDA number. There will be case number. There should be case number somewhere. Yeah, see, it's going to tell you. Well, no, it should tell you who. I haven't looked at this in a while, but you should be able to see the agency that they've come from. So you should be able to trace them back. But it's. My assumption is they get some of this data from the courts and the clerk's office. But since either one is very open, it's hard to know. But they, like OAMC, answered very quickly and are pretty reasonably open about it. Here comes the phone. Okay. The Cook County Circuit Courts. While the court creates the data, some of the data, we believe, is transferred electronically from the state's attorney to the courts. But when the court collects their data, they don't maintain it. So to get this data, you have to file a request with the Chief Judge's office for access. And then you have to, if that gets approved, you then have to, he submits your approval, your request of his approval to the circuit clerk of the court, the county circuit clerk's office, to the clerk's office, and then they have to give you the data. And depending if they like you or not depends, and what you're going to do with it depends how quickly you get it. So for another project we're working on, it took us 15 months or something like that. 16
Does
months.
that mean they like you or don't like you?
They don't like us. We were told, and to be honest, I'll just be honest, right? It'll come out in the court's project anyways. We worked with the judge's office. He was pretty open to us using his data to inform communities. The clerk's office, one of their top level representatives, I was in the judge's office with one of his top people, and she turned to me right away and looked right in my face a foot away from me and said, "We don't want any more data that's on the web than is already there." And they knew that's what we were going to do with it, so they just sat on our request for 15 months, hoping they timed us out. Right? And they weren't going to do that because I'm a stubborn person. But so if you're going to request this data, you have to have that idea in mind, at least in the meantime. We're all working to kind of change that reality, but it is not going to be a quick process. Anyone go down? There's all kinds of really great data. If you can get it, it's clean and understand it. One of the things and we're learning this in the courts project we're working on now, is you really got to be careful. It's not as easy, not that the crime incident data is as easy, but it's very easy to misunderstand this data. For instance, here's one of the issues that you got to be worried about. If you were to just get conviction data, which is the easiest stuff to get, if someone goes on probation, every time they go back into court on a violation, it's not a whole new case number. That case number comes up again. Same case number, all the data. And if you get sentenced to 5 days, that's the common thing. You get drug tested by your probation officer, you get busted, you go back for 5 or 10 days. It'll say basically, sentenced to Cook County Jail, time served if you've been in custody for 2 days, 8 days. But that's another line. So it looks like it's a whole nother charge on top of the original conviction, which it's not. It does not delineate conviction, post-conviction, probation stuff. Now, at least in the format we got it. There's various formats that release to different people, unfortunately. They have a very rich data set. They can tell you, they didn't release it to us, but they can tell you when a case comes in, how many hearings it had, who asked for extensions of time, if it got tossed, why it got tossed. Was it because of an illegal search? Was it because the prosecutor wanted it nollied or not prosecuted? Was it a defense motion? Did the judge toss it? All of that's in there. They know the prosecutor, they know the judge involved. All of that's in there. It's a really rich data set if you can get access to it. It's very, 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 very hard to access it. I know one person that has, but there's a whole different political runaround to get, and he can't ever make it public.
Anything else?
Yeah, I just want to look at the national model. The Maryland courts are the national model. You can click and go through. It's a little bit of a complicated process and time to get it. But if you can get access to it and understand it, I think you're going to be able to tell some really great things. Right?
Yeah, we're actually the Spring Chi-Town Coding Crew, SC3, kind of refer to ourselves as, is currently working with Chris and Tracy on another project, and it's kind of to zoom in on this court part of the data that hasn't been looked at before, just based on the FOIA request that Tracy was able to do. Tracy's been
requested the judge. It's not a FOIA.
not a FOIA request.
Yeah, courts are powered from FOIA.
It's requested from the Chief Judge's office. And Tracy's been alluding to that for a little bit now. Jeff knows more about it than I do. But what you see is that you see a lot of interesting information. But the one field that you see that's
Could
unique
you
to it.
zoom in?
Sure. Zoom in? Please.
A bit more?
Sure.
That's great. Thanks.
So the one really interesting field you see with this particular data set is you see the charge disposition, which is basically defendant sentenced to DOC or defendant
Well, if it's
has
conviction.
time served or defendant sentenced to probation. So yeah, in the case of the conviction data, that's what we see.
You're going to be able to tell if you get this rich data set. You'll be able to tell patterns from what prosecutors involved, what judges involved, how sentencing disparities by race or age of the offender, geography of where the crime occurred. There's all kinds of really great things that can be learned, especially trends over time, if you can get access to the rich data. Can we do this?
He's not.
Yeah, no, I'm saying we did it. Okay. This is, they, once again, are not, they weren't very responsive. So this is just data that's available on their, look up the inmate lookup. Now, this is only available right now if you, by individual inmate. So you have to do a search. So not useful. It's not machine ready. You can't download multiple cases.
It is, however, it would be susceptible to another project like the Cook County Jail Data Project to scrape it and to get access to that data.
Correct.
No one has done that, though, of my own.
Go up a little bit. Oregon, the state of Oregon has a good, it's a national model for this, and has a good, and there's some other states that have pretty good data. Most that do have data up, though, are like Illinois, where you can look up an inmate, which I call more about voyeurism.
Yeah, you can find that. You can find that here, the DOC website, the Department of Corrections.
Yes. All right. So,
Excuse me.
yeah.
Can I ask, has these various departments, the police, the courts, have they given you any reasons, like in writing, as to why they don't make this data available? Just focus on the police, for instance.
Yeah, well, literally, they said, I said it before, they said that if they gave us the empty field names, we would somehow be able to figure out their schema and someone would hack their site, hack their databases.
Right. So in this
Which
case, all you were actually asking for was just what
Blank
fields they
field
collect.
names, no data, blank field names.
It's like it's government metadata.
Right,
That's what they're
right.
collecting.
It's like incredibly, I mean, it's unbelievably easily won if I were to sue for FOIA violations, right? But the reality is they just don't want to give it up. They're worried about the political ramifications of what people will find.
So it's political, you think.
Well, yeah, and it's the same thing with state attorneys.
Okay, with the incidents reports, what's the expiration on those? I mean, how long are they in the database?
No, they've been up. They put a database. The city's data portal put up a few years ago now, right? Back to January of 2001, and they'll be in the database. It seems like, forever. But once again, you can only get so much out of that. It's a rich data set to a degree, but it's still pretty limited. And the courts are not open. The courts are not open to FOIA. So the Freedom of Information Act in Illinois and federally both exempt the courts from having to be opened by FOIA. But it does state that their records are deemed open.
You want
Right.
to talk a little bit about how you built the site?
Yeah.
And so